Hi, everyone, and welcome to the July 1st, 2022 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your guest host, Krista Kafer, Denver Post columnist. Thanks for joining us as we continue the summer-long search for the new permanent host. The results are in. The Colorado 2022 primary elections are finally over. Republican Heidi Ganahl will be the Republican candidate to run against Governor Jared Polis for his seat, while Republican Joe O'Dea will be facing off against Senator Michael Bennet. Patty Calhoun, editor of the Westward, fantastic Westward. Tell us, how is that, were you at all surprised? I know you were thinking that perhaps Ron Hanks could pull it out.
Well, before this show started, I was confessing just how wrong I was about many of these. So I think I'm going to have to join in with Tina Peters in saying it was all rigged. It's a big lie. Tina won, which I'd predicted she might do. Ron Hanks won, which I think I might have predicted very wrongly. It's really fascinating that despite all the noise that was made over, let's just say, the more crackpotty edge of the Republican Party, the moderates really pulled through in this election, which makes you wonder, are we just not paying attention? Did people really come out to the unaffiliateds make that much difference when they went out and voted? But it's going to make the November elections much more interesting and closer than they would have been. It's going to make it a little harder for the Democrats because they are actually going to be debating people who have reasonable positions in some cases and are able to talk about them without, say, talking about the big lie. Heidi Ganahl is going to have a very uphill climb, I think, because Jared Polis still is popular, has a lot of money. She still has some things to answer for regarding her own positions on the big lie. Joe O'Dea is an interesting candidate, and I think that's the real race to watch.
Marianne Goodland, she is a chief legislative reporter with coloradopolitics.org. You know, I know that 28% of people voted for Tina Peters. That says to me that maybe that is the percentage of the Republican Party that is a little delusional. Does this? What do you think?
I actually looked at the votes for both Tina Peters and Mike O'Donnell, who on election night actually was in second place, and then as the vote totals changed, of course, Tina Peters came in second, but very, very narrowly. And you have to look at that. 56% of the GOP voters voted for an election denier. The only choice was, were you going to vote for somebody who might be running the office in an orange jumpsuit and come January, or you were going to vote for somebody who wasn't under indictment from a grand jury. So it tells me that the election denier wing of the GOP is still very, very strong. You just had more and I'm going to guess that this the unaffiliated voters who made the difference for Pam Anderson. That's been my take on it. On the Hanks O'Dea race, Ron Hanks got great traction at the state assembly. He couldn't raise any money. I mean, the Democrats did everything they could to help him, and it wound up being a lot of money flushed down the toilet, frankly, because the voters just said, no, we're just not going to go that way.
Thanks for curing me of my optimism. Dave Kopel with the Independence Institute. Do I have any right to be optimistic, or is 56% of the GOP still in the denier wing?
Well, you're a Republican, so I think you've got a lot more reason to be optimistic about the Senate and the governor's race than a week ago. The Republicans chose the strongest candidates to put up, and the national political prognosticators have moved the Bennet seat from safe Democrat to likely Democrat. Eric Sonderman, I think, had a good observation in Colorado Politics, where he said O'Dea, who's a first-time candidate, businessman, reminds him of Ron Johnson. Not the ridiculous things Johnson did recently, but in 2010, when Ron Johnson unseated incumbent incumbent Democratic Wisconsin Senator Russ Feingold, and he sees some of that same energy in O'Dea. I think O'Dea had a great victory speech where he said he wants to be a Republican Joe Manchin. And that's more where the people of Colorado are, rather than with a candidate who will vote in lockstep with their party all the time. But obviously, there's a huge amount of money on the Democratic side. Jared Polis is a centimillionaire, can spend as much as he wants, and Michael Bennet is a fundraising powerhouse, ran the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee fundraising. So the Dems So great news for television stations. There will be lots of ads coming soon.
Tyrone Glover, civil rights attorney. So the Democrats put a lot of money into this race, hoping to tip it in favor of the Hanks Peters crowd. What should their strategy be going forward?
I think just staying on message. I mean, the Republicans have painted this as some big recalibration, everybody sort of coming back to the center, moderating. But I think really, don't get it twisted. We're still toiling in the margins of this party pre-Trump, right? It was in a much different place. And yes, we sort of maybe took a bit of a step back towards the center, but I think we're still very far right of where that party used to be. So I think the Democrats staying on message, continuing to do what they've done, will ultimately, I think, carry the day at the end of all of this. I think really what made the difference in a lot of these races was name recognition, notoriety in some cases, and I think that the Democratic candidates still have that in spades, and it'll carry the day.
Thank you. Colorado's most expensive race, the Democratic race for House District 6, proved to be a close one. Progressive candidate Elizabeth Epps has claimed victory. Meanwhile, Republican candidate Barbara Kirkmeyer will be running against the uncontested Democratic Yadira Caballero in the highly competitive District 8. Marianne Goodland, you're tracking these races really strongly. What do you think is going to happen? Will these two candidates pull it out against their opponents come November?
I don't think it's even a question mark in House District 6. That's a district where it's at central Denver, Capitol Hill, going all the way east out to Windsor Gardens and Aurora. The voter registration numbers are 5-1 in favor of the Democrat. So Elizabeth Epps, her toughest battle was clearly the one Tuesday night. The Kirkmeyer-Caraveo race, though, I think that one's going to be very, very interesting to watch, and I think it's going to be really close. Kirkmeyer is a powerhouse. She is a Weld County institution. And so long as Republicans can turn out the votes, and if Kirkmeyer can appeal to the unaffiliated, which she's going to have to do in order to win that race, I think this is frankly her contest to lose. Caraveo is a relative newcomer, and that also, I'm not sure, is going to play as well in Weld County as it might in some other parts of the state.
Dave Kopel, Epps is pretty far to the left as opposed to March. Does she lose some of those moderate voters in the Democratic Party come November?
Well, I certainly hope so, but as Marion said, that's not going to make any difference. This was parts of this district my dad used to represent for many years, and there were times when he was the only Jewish legislator in the entire Colorado legislature. And I'm really sad to see that the Democratic Party chose a candidate who talks about billionaire Jewish sports team owners and calls President Obama a puppet of Israel. And her defense on this is, I can't be anti-Jewish because I'm black and queer. Well, I'll tell you, world history shows you can have Jew haters of every race and of every sexual orientation.
Tyrone, looking at the Epps race specifically, and I think they made a pretty good case that she is probably going to pull it out. But does that say something about the party, that the party has moved to the left?
So I live in District 6, and I'm familiar with Elizabeth Epps. I think what this race symbolizes is with Elizabeth Epps, you get her. Whether you agree with everything that she stands for, she is authentic. You know who you're sending in there to represent you. She's not bought by corporate interests. And so I think that's ultimately, what really carried the day. She has positions that maybe some folks disagree with. She has ones where folks in my neighborhood, in my district, are wholeheartedly in support of. But at the end of the day, we know who we're sending there, and I think that, I would, quote me, eat my hat if at the end of the day there wasn't the Democratic nominee who carried in District 6. So I think she'll be our person.
Patty, Caraveo and Kirkmeyer are both very likable women, but their differences are not so much about character as they are about policy. What do you see happening in that district?
it's going to be a real lesson in how the redistricting worked, pulling together that 8th congressional district, how Colorado, that's going to show us a lot more about how Colorado is really going and where the unaffiliateds lean, because we don't know that right now. In Denver, Epps, of course, is going to be in the legislature now. What was too bad and what that race showed us is just the influence of dark money and how even on the state level, going down from the bigger races, dark money can influence it and make it really ugly in neighborhoods across the city. And that was too bad because both of those women would have been good legislators. March would have been good. Epps will be a really interesting legislator for us to talk about here at this table. But District 8 and District 7, both of those congressional districts are going to be wild races.
Thank you. More in Congress, Representative Lauren Boebert fended off a challenge in her GOP-leaning 3rd congressional district, while other people who denied the election results lost their races. David Kopel, could you comment on the Boebert-Coram race? I hope my own prejudice here, I was sort of hoping Coram would have done better. Does this mean that the district really loves Boebert or that Coram just didn't quite cut it?
I think maybe some of both. And it also shows the power of incumbency. You know, if this had been an open seat, Coram actually would have had a head start because he's been in the state legislature before in name recognition, but now she's been out. And I think she's been, whatever you think of her views, she's been conscientious about going around the district and meeting people and appearing to the district to be hardworking for the interest of that district. There are a lot of people who say that election denialism is a threat to our democracy, and I completely agree with that. But unfortunately, the vast majority of Democrats who say that don't really mean it, because we see the millions of dollars they put in Colorado to have election deniers elected, and how they've done this similarly in Pennsylvania and Illinois more successfully. You know, if you think it's a threat to democracy, then you ought to prefer that the Republican Party nominate candidates who play fair and agree with accept election results. And even if they're more likely to win and they might vote in ways you don't like, that's still much more important in the long term. But it's really sad that much of the Democratic Party, for all its platitudes about how they care about our democracy, don't. And you can also see that in how they gobble up and go along with the election denialism of Hillary Clinton from 2016 and Stacey Abrams from 2018.
Tyrone, he makes a great point about how, as Americans, we really need to see good, strong candidates in both the Democratic and the Republican Party who accept election results and the peaceful transfer of power. How can we change the incentives during the election so that everyone is on board with doing the right thing?
Gosh, I mean, that's really the million-dollar question right there, right? How can we get both parties in a way from sort of toiling in the margins, and with a candidate like Boebert, who part of her own sort of personal celebrity and notoriety is this host of attributes, including denying elections, including being really over the top on a lot of different issues that give her constituency a certain level of confidence. So, when it's not so much about clicks or sort of one sentence headlines or tweets that are, I think, driving a lot of our election cycles, right? Then maybe we can get a little bit to a place where folks are just examining these issues on a much deeper, more, I think, even analytical level. But right now, it's really there's so much celebrity. We saw in this last this last round of primaries. Just how much having that recognition matters, and it's just really hard to give that up, because I think it transfers into whether you get the votes.
Patty Calhoun, I'm sure Boebert's a nice person. I like Coram. Does he have a future still here in Colorado, or is he bound to retire?
Well, losing to someone who there's no other someone like Lauren Boebert, really. Losing to Lauren Boebert really doesn't reflect that much on him. That was going to be a tough race to win. Lauren Boebert, we don't have Tina Peters to kick around, but Lauren Boebert is a gift that keeps on giving. So just last week, she started talking about how It's time for the end of separation of church and state, and the church should be telling us what we do in government. That's novel. She may be losing her office and her Shooter's Grill, where she came to notoriety because of the pistol-packing waitresses. Her lease is not being renewed, which she has said. But I will tell you what we'll keep renewing is the unbelievable amount of media coverage she gets and the way she can stir people up with her tweets. She's definitely a different part of Colorado, but she certainly rolled over quorum in the last race.
Marianne, these people who great notoriety with the things that they say on Twitter and the things that they do, it really is a gift to the press. But is the press kind of responsible, though, for promoting election deniers and other crazy antics?
That's a really interesting question, and it's one that a conversation that I have from time to time with other members of the press, and particularly those of us at the state capitol. We go back and forth between do we really need to report some of these things and give them more attention, and the flip side, of course, is that these are elected officials, or these are people who are prominent in their parties, or what have you, and it's hard to say no to that. We know how good it is for our clicks, or for the traffic on our websites. It's fantastic. It's also painful to watch because it's hard to see people who are advocating against democracy in that way. You don't want to give them that attention, but on the other hand, it's awful hard not to.
Well said. Denver City Council is also facing changes in leadership. District 3's Jamie Torres hopes to step up as a new city council president in place of former council president Stacey Gilmore. Councilwoman Amanda Sandoval will then be running for Councilwoman Jamie Torres' role as pro tem. Tyrone, you live in the city. How do you expect that these leadership changes will affect the council?
So this is a council that has really, I think, been ready. They've been weathering so much of everything that's going on with the pandemic and the resulting challenges, which we're still dealing with. But I think they're ready to see this change and shift in leadership and really hit the ground running. And I think it's just going to be an exciting time for the council, especially sort of in this turbulent era where we have sort of a shift in sort of the strong mayoral power, both via some referendums and things like that, and also I think based on what it is they actually want to do. So I think it's going to be an exciting time in the city. Instead of them responding so much to the crises, this feels like a council that wants to get to work. We also have even some outsider folks coming in sort of in the same vein as Elizabeth Epps. I know that civil rights and labor attorney Sarah Parody is also running for one of the at-large seats. So I think we're going to see an interesting dynamic and a council that's ready to roll their sleeves up and get to work and be less reactive.
Patty Calhoun, we've got a mayoral race in the future, not too distant. Does the composition and actions of this council, will it affect that race in the future?
It certainly could. I mean, Jamie Torres is looking at taking charge in 3 weeks, which would be when the new city council positions are in, not the new city council members, but just the positions. So if she's elected, no one is up against her to be the council president. She will have been in that position for a year when the new council members come in. Presumably she will win her race next April. And so she'll have a running start to really not just direct the council, but maybe go up against whoever is the new mayor. And there's no question, as Tyrone said, people are getting ready to challenge the strong mayor form. You've seen a lot of actions taken over the last few years where they want approval of big appointments, and they got it. Council is ready to take charge, but what happens in this mayor's race and the other city council races in April is going to change the direction of the city a lot. We see it with the Epps March race. That was ugly, and I think we could have just as ugly a mayoral race next April.
I could see that. Marianne Goodland, Denver is facing some pretty serious challenges right now with crime, with homelessness, with the cost of housing and other issues. How do you think this council should handle that set of great challenges?
Well, it all comes down to the money, and can they wield more control over the city budget, going with, as Patty referenced, going up against a strong mayor. I think that's going to make a huge difference. If they can have more say about how the city directs its money, yes, then I think that's definitely possible. I think the thing that I'm watching for is to see who Jamie Torres wants to see as mayor. Is she gonna want somebody that is more in line with what she wants to do, which is to have a stronger city council, or is she fine with whomever comes out? But the list of people who are running for mayor right now just seems to grow exponentially every day. Half the legislature, I think, wants to be Denver mayor. So I'm interested to see the relationships that she builds over this next year with those mayoral candidates. Who does she come out in favor of, and is that somebody who she'll be able to work with on the vision that she wants to enact for the city of Denver?
So Dave Kopel, strong mayor, strong council, both systems have their advantages or disadvantages. What do you think is best for the city of Denver?
We probably went too far on the strong mayor thing, and it could be reformed, but doesn't have to necessarily be ended. But here's some good news, folks. There's certain elections where the best candidates almost always win. And those are when legislative bodies are choosing their own leadership. Because whether it's in the Colorado House and the party leadership or whatever, the candidates know, the voters, the legislators or council people, know very well who they're voting for. And the legislators or council people vote in their self-interest, which is to have the most competent leadership they can. So that's, you know, that you don't always vote for the most competent person in a general election, but at the legislative level, you almost always get the best of who's available. So if the council thinks Jamie Torres is the best, I will accept their judgment.
We can only hope, right? Now for the best part of the day, we are going to do Disgrace of the Week. So who's been naughty? Patty.
Oh, who hasn't been naughty? But I want to go with the Denver in Decay crowd. All you had to do was go downtown yesterday for the Avs parade and rally, and I'm sure a lot of people hadn't been downtown since before the pandemic to see that Denver is not, we have not gone through the apocalypse. It is not Mad Max downtown. You had 500,000 happy people, most of them as drunk as the Avalanche, out celebrating and really having a great day. So I would recommend you get out and go see downtown. There are no question. We've got problems. We've got the mall that's ripped up. We have homeless that are camping in various places, just as in almost every major city. But Denver still looks good. You can still go downtown, have a good time, and enjoy the city.
And for all those people, there wasn't a single arrest. Well put. Marianne, who's your Disgrace of the Week?
The 70% of Colorado voters who stayed home and didn't participate. This is the heart of democracy. And regardless of which party you're affiliated with or none at all, please don't do this again in November.
Amen. Dave.
I think it's okay for people who don't have an informed opinion not to vote. And I also understand that a lot of Democrats, where there were no major races statewide, didn't do, and they might not have even had a local, state legislative race to vote in. The sleaziest ad of the year was Representative Doug Lamborn's TV ads against Dave Williams. Williams had introduced a bill in the legislature to say if you get a red light camera fine for a minor traffic violation, you can give, instead of paying the fine to the government, you can pay that amount to any qualified nonprofit. And the Lamborn ad says, instead of helping law enforcement keep us safe, the fines would go to pro-abortion groups like Planned Parenthood and groups supporting defund the police like Black Lives Matter. That was extremely misleading.
Yeah, you're right. That's awful. Tyrone, who's your naughty person of the week?
Well, a group of naughty persons, I'm going to put our SCOTUS Supreme Court on blast for the cascade of decisions that we're all now have to unpack and deal with here in Colorado, not just including the Roe reversal, but EPA stuff. Miranda was sort of, Miranda rights were taken apart, as well as some bad decisions on gerrymandering. So those decisions have been recent, and they're going to see now how we're going to deal with those in Colorado. But that's my naughty persons of the week.
Let's get our nice on. Patty.
Since I'm telling everyone to go downtown, one of the places to go tonight is to Santa Fe Drive, where Art District on Santa Fe will have a big First Friday bash. over 100 businesses, galleries are open. It's a Frida Kahlo birthday party. Get out and experience the city.
Nice. Marianne.
To the GOP voters in Douglas, El Paso, and Larimer counties who sent a very clear message, I believe, to Rocky Mountain gun owners on their choices for the State House. And I think that message was go away.
I'll second that. Dave?
I believe you pointed out that Rocky Mountain gun owners and their endorsements in a contested race haven't led to any win for their endorsees in the last 2 election cycles. Colorado State Senator John Cook, who's finished up his final term, and there was a nice interview with him in Colorado politics. He had previously been the sheriff of Weld County and my client in a Second Amendment case. And you know, as sheriff, you get to be the boss, and if you say, do this, it gets done. And he was one of those people who really could make the transition to the legislature, where it's all about cooperation and building coalitions. And he helped pass a vast amount of bipartisan constructive legislation, and it's no wonder he was elected to his party's leadership.
Well said. Tyrone.
Got to go back up to SCOTUS, but this time I'm going to be nice. So my something nice of the week is Ketanji Brown Jackson being sworn in yesterday, a historic nomination and confirmation.
I couldn't agree more. Well, folks, that is all the time we have. I want to say thank you to this fantastic panel. Great job. If you'd like to watch tonight's episode again, check it out at pbs12.org or the PBS12 YouTube channel. And don't forget to share your input with us at CIO@pbs12.org. Thank you and have a fantastic night.